monitoring the system is ready to start with questa relation of Giuseppe Scarcella, researcher in management assessment of fish, in particolare all the project of
common salt.
And in a group of GFCN and other.
Yes, thank you.
This the presentation of importance of ecolabelling in fishery management, and another lesson disaster but Michele Casini, the same experience of curriculum of Giuseppe, the same, right? It's a management assessment of fish, but your experience in the North Sea.
Exactly.
Okay. The question is possible on the background of the presentation of Giuseppe. Thanks for your participation this week for the lesson. Giuseppe, grazie.
That's okay.
Prego.
So, thank you very much. Thank you. It's a pleasure for me actually to be here. It's actually one of few times I've been in Fano in this nice place, and I know most of you, some of you actually, but I want to continue with the presentation of a few words about me. So I'm a PhD in marine biology and ecology, and I studied at University of Ancona. I did a PhD in the growth of fish, and especially I focus on rockfish. During my academic experience, I worked in the National Research Council and started with the master thesis, and I started working many years ago, especially on artificial reefs and artificial structure. And after I started to work with a non-permanent position, again working on the impact of gas platform on the fish assemblage. And also I moved, as Mauro said, I moved to study the stock assessment, and I was involved in this monitoring project about the common sole. And after I start using this data to do stock assessment of demersal stock in the Adriatic and in the Mediterranean, and after I won a position of permanent researcher in CNR, I continued, and also now I'm a senior scientist. The main area of interest is fishery management, basically. So all that is related to fishery, the so-called harvest strategy. The harvest strategy is a big, two big words that try to describe the process of data collection, provision of advice, and harvest control rules. So I think it's all the area of interest that are scientific based in order to give advice to the administration in order to manage stock. Of course, I work in stock assessment and modeling. I work in survey at sea, but I'm also consultant for CABs. I'm sorry, I'm going to use a lot of acronym in this presentation. Acronym was quite a big issue in the life. The CABs stand for Conformity Assessment Body, because I work as consultant for this conformity assessment body for that are giving eco-labeling to the fishery products. So the presentation of today is in two big parts. One is talking about in general fishery management, and I will say a few words about the status of resources in the Mediterranean Sea, the knowledge-based management that we have, and the eco-labeling in fishery. And after, I will focus more specifically the eco-labeling, and I will talk about one of the most important eco-label that is worldwide recognized, that is Marine Stewardship Council, this MSC. I will talk about the process, and I will do a sort of training for you in the MSC, and also I will talk about another experience that was a regional label for the MSC, for the Adriatic fishery product. Why is important? Why is important to talk about eco-labeling interacted with the fishery management? because the eco-labeling is a way to, in a certain sense, to start a virtuous circle in order to improve the status of resources and improve the activity of fisheries. So I was thinking that in a kind of PhD that is talking about fishery in the Mediterranean, and I was thinking that was quite important to try to form the student, to provide this information to the student about this reality that actually in the Mediterranean is almost absent. So I think there is a lot of space for developing this kind of experience also in the Mediterranean. I would say that I'm talking about the status of resources in the Mediterranean and the Adriatic Sea. This is the old publication. Now there is a new one on 2022, but you can see that the fishery resources in the Mediterranean are in a overfishing situation. We have to, most of you probably know, we have two metrics to understand the status of a fishery resource. One metric is the fishery mortality compared with the fishery at the maximum sustainable yield. The other metric is the biomass at sea. So how many fish, how many adults are in the sea. So we try to diagnostic the status of a resource looking at these two parameters: fishing mortality, so how many fish die because of the fishery, and how many adults remain in the sea. And you can see from this graph here that this ratio of F over FMSY for the resources that were for the demersal and small pelagic resources that were assessed up to 2018 is quite high. Anyway, there is a decreasing trend, but it's still quite high. This number should be 1. Instead, is more than 2. And this is a problem. And also the knowledge about the status of resources on the other side is increasing in the sense that there is more interest in GFCM in doing stock assessment, and the number of stock that are assessed is increasing. The last, not this publication, the publication of 2022 says that the 78% of the stock assessed are in overfishing, so F is above FMSY. And if we compare with the previous year, there is a slight decrease, but we always have to think that the number of stock that we assess is quite limited, considering all the species and the stock that are in the Mediterranean. In terms of the other metric that we use to understand the status of the fishery resource, is the biomass at sea. It's more complex, actually. It's more complex because we don't know exactly, due to many reasons, the reference point is in biomass. So we don't know the biomass that should be at sea in order to have a sustainable stock. And so we use these histograms. In this publication, they were using this histogram in order to understand the trend of the biomass. And we see a lot of green, but we have always to think that this is coming from survey at sea, so probably is not telling us the real situation. However, for sure, in the last year there is a much higher interest in the status of the resource. GFCM increased a lot its power in doing the stock assessment. The other RFMO that is active in the Mediterranean is the ICAT, the one that is dealing with tuna, and also the bluefin tuna is improving. The swordfish, there is now a rebuilding plan, and also for the albacore there will be a rebuilding plan. So there is a lot of interest. There is a lot of work that is happening now. And so it's really important that this work is used in the framework of ecolabelling, because of course we are in a situation, especially in the Adriatic, where we have a lot of knowledge. I mean, the Adriatic basin is really well studied in terms of fishery resources. We will have in the next days presentation about marine technology. So my colleague Alessandro Lucchetti will explain all fishing gears, and we have some of the best experts in this sense, not only on Mediterranean level, but I think world level. We have quite good knowledge about the fishing effort that is applied. We know exactly how much in the last year, especially how much fishing effort is displaced around the basin. We have colleagues from OGS. They do this ecopath modeling, and they know quite in deep sense what is the status of the ecosystem in terms of interaction of the food web. And of course, the work we do, we have these new modelings that are single model species that we do with stock synthesis. So it's quite advanced. So all this knowledge, to be honest with you, if we compare with other areas of the world, it's really advanced. The main issue is that, in my view, is that we don't use this knowledge. We don't use it to help fishery in order to move from harvest activity to a managed activity. So I think and one of the key in order to do this step to a more efficient use of resources is also ecolabelling, because ecolabelling is going for sure to oblige managers and fishermen to use the knowledge that is coming from the science. And all of us, the scientists, are stakeholder involved can be stakeholder involved in the eco-labeling process. And I'm going to talk about this. Okay. So this is I took this part of this graph. I took from the book of Ray Hilborn and Walters. These are basically is a synthesis of the stages that the management of fisheries we have to take into account. It starts, of course, from the society. The society requests the management authority to manage the fishery. The management authority, the ministry, the regional authority, of course, has to define a management objective. The management objective, of course, is usually is already defined as a maximum sustainable yield or other thing. Don't think only about the Mediterranean case, think worldwide. So, of course, we can have a management strategy, certain specific management actions, fishing ban, for example, and these fish management actions are going to influence the fishery. And all of these, on the right side of this scheme, you say that the fishery science is going to provide advice in some of these steps. Now, on the other side, I put that the eco-labeling actually can influence all these steps, because can influence the society in order to have a market request from the society to have a sustainable product to use, can influence the management authority, can define new management objectives, can provide advice also on the management strategy and define other management action, and of course, the last one can influence the fishermen. So at the moment, this is maybe is not clear for you at this step, at this slide, but hopefully at the end of this presentation, you will understand more about all this process. But I do a really simple example. I will do a lot of examples in the rest of today, but I do a really simple example with some fishery that, for example, has been certified in the north of Adriatic. Was the only one until few years ago that was MSC certified. That is the clam fishery. One of the problem of the clam fishery when it entered in the certification was that, for example, they didn't take any data on all the other species, species that are collected, that are caught together with clam in this hydraulic dredge. So in the years of certification, on a voluntary basis, of course, all the fishermen, in order to sell the product as MSC labeled, they had to have a sort of logbook with all the data, with all this information that they were absent before. So this is something that, of course, improved the knowledge of this fishery, but provide also better a sort of best practice for this kind of fishery that was not requested by the management authority before, was not requested by anybody, but was a way to improve the fishery in this sense. So this is just an example. Just some backgrounds. Of course, we say that many commercial fish stocks are fully exploited or overexploited. So I think that eco-labeling can work in this sense in order to improve the status of the target stocks. Of course, one big problem is the incidental bycatch. So fishery, unfortunately, is not so selective activity in many cases. So there is this problem of incidental bycatch, not only of endangered species, but also other species. Another point that in many cases, the implementation of conventional fishery management has not been always active. I mean, we have some fishery that are that don't have a developed activity. So in the sense that they don't, the manager, they basically they don't care if this certain fishery has an impact on certain resource. So this way is the eco-labeling can help in this sense. Of course, an increased awareness by the consumers is quite important. And of course, the eco-labeling, it takes into account all the international instruments that are available. I mean, in this case, I just cited the 1995 Code of Conduct of Responsible Fishery from FAO. It is one of the most important document for the fishery management. And this is a code of conduct that is not obliging anybody to have a responsible fishery, but from this document, all the principles of the standards of eco-labeling are developed. So these are the background. In terms of continue talking about eco-labeling. So eco-labeling is a voluntary product labeling, conveying environmental information to consumers that seeks to create a market-based incentive for better management. We will talk a lot about the certification bodies. So there is a system, of course, there is a quite firm and important system in order to have a certification body that are dealing with the complainants of the involved parties in these activities. And this is a really important aspect of the certification. The certification, of course, needs to be open to stakeholders that have to be involved in all the activity. And of course, all the procedure must be independent, must be transparent, and there should be a system to resolve any sort of dispute within the eco-labeling process. And this is something that, with the example of the Marine Stewardship Council, we are going to see in the following slides. Just a few examples. We'll talk today about MSC and Marine Stewardship Council, but there are many other labels, and some are quite regional: Indonesian tuna, Icelandic responsible fishery, Alaska responsible fishery, or other one are just focusing on dolphin safe activity, like some tuna fishery for US Department. Another quite important brand is the Friend of the Sea. So just I want to stress that some of them, they talk about responsible fishery rather than sustainable. And this is a quite important observation, in the sense that in some cases, the fishing, the responsible fishery label are the certain activity that have a sort of bottom-up approach, are the fishermen that are interested to show that they are responsible in order to take this label. MSC instead is more strict in this sense, actually talks about the sustainability of the exploitation of the stocks, and so of course in a certain sense, is more difficult to deal with. So it's all clear now. I know that this can, at the moment, all this can seem quite theoretical, and in practice, I will do some example. But if there are any questions, now is the moment. I'm thinking to stop for a coffee break around 11, so we have still time. I don't expect that we have any question, but I will stop during the presentation and stop you anytime. So, as I said, I'm going to talk about MSC. MSC has been founded, I think, at the end of the 90s by WWF, and is a charity form that has been developed in a different way from WWF. And what MSC is doing at the moment is just setting some standard. So the standard are some certain rules that need to be observed in order to get certified. And there are two standards, basically. One standard that is about the fishery, so takes try to define if a fishery is sustainable from the time that is the fish is fished by the sea until it's landed. And there is another important as well, a standard that is about the chain of custody. So it's of course crucial that these two standards they go together, because once that the fish is fished and is landed, it's important that it's not mixed with other fish that of the same species that is fished with another method and not in a sustainable way. So of course the definition of the two standards, that one is of the fish and the one of the chain of custody is crucially important. The standards are set in compliance with the ISIL Alliance, some socio-economic approach, and with the FAO guidelines. And there are two big actors in this. One is the ASI, is a body that is going to control the certification body. So MSC is not certifying directly a fishery. MSC is just setting the rules. There are certification bodies that are private company, DNV, RINA in Italy, there are many of them, that are going to build a team that is going to check if a fishery is in accordance with the standard. Of course, there is someone that needs to control who is controlling, and in this case is the accreditation service. If the accreditation service during an audit will see that the cab is not performing in the correct way, it blocks the certification body for 1 year. So it's really important that everything is observed in the process. Of course, at the end of the day, what is certified is a fishery, and also the supply chain. So the two things are always joined together. Again, this is more or less the process. The fishery can get certified. We need to have a certification of the chain of custody, so there are no mix of fish coming from other sources. There is the ecolabelling, and the final consumer, all of us, is going to request and going to buy at the supermarket what has this level. Okay, this is quite the circle that I was talking before, how MSC works with fishery and supplier. If we start the process from here, so the fishery meets the fishery standard is independent are independently certified as sustainable. These products are taken by the retailers. Of course, we need to have a traceability supply. And of course, the consumers are going to request for this traceability. And there is an increase in market demand, there is an increase in value, and more fishermen is going to choose to have this kind of label. So it's a virtuous circle in a certain sense, because in this way, the fishermen, they request to be certified in order to have a bigger market, in order to have a higher price. Higher price means that probably they are going to fish less, in theory. But we will talk about this. The main actor, I'm going to repeat more or less, the main actor is MSC that is going to define the standard for the chain of custody and for the fishery. And the other actors are the accreditation body and the certification body. The certification body decide of a team of experts that can be a PhD in fish biology or fishery biology, as you can be in the future. And this team can will have the audit with the fishery and will decide if the fishery is certified or not. Going more in detail, you see again that the MSC defines the standards. The standards is a big document of more than 500 pages, really difficult. It's like, I don't know if some of you have friends working as lawyer that they did the law exam, so it's, I don't know in English, the civil code, the penal code, so it's big. And it's really difficult to know all of them. And so MSC is defining this, the scheme requirements, and the MSC as contract with the accreditation service. The accreditation service credits the CABs, so this private company that are going to hire expert for the team audit, and they assess the fishery. Of course, stakeholders, I mean managers, scientists, NGOs can have an impact in all this process, because all this process is open, is transparent, is on everything on the MSC website is transparent, and any stakeholder, any NGO can intervene during the process. And they can say, no, you said that this fishery is sustainable, it actually is not because of this reason. So there is a quite precise template that they need to put all the evidence that is not sustainable, and the CAB with the expert team, they have to reply to the stakeholder, and if the stakeholder are not happy, they can block all the process and they can do an objection, and there is another independent adjudicator that is going to decide. So when there is a lot of discussion about that, this eco-labeling, especially MSC, has been criticized a lot, it's actually true. Maybe there is something wrong in all the process, but it's also true that all the process is quite transparent, and stakeholders, if are interested, they can intervene and block and object. And there are some good examples of tuna fisheries in the Indian Ocean that has been objected and now are failed and are not anymore. They lost their certification. Okay, this is all the process. I'm not going to detail in all this process of fishery certification, but I would like to stress something that is quite of the center of the title of this presentation: the importance in fishery management. Why there is that importance? Because we start from the pre-assessment, the pre-evaluation, if we want. There is a lot of document that needs to be prepared during the initial phase. After the fishery is announced, don't worry, I'm not going to talk about what is a new OA and what we define fishery. We're going to talk later. There is a site visit. There is a score of the fishery in terms of how the fishery is in accordance with the standard. There is a review, and this review, of course, is open to the stakeholder. And once the fishery is certified, consider that the fishery can be certified with certain conditions, okay, if necessary. This is quite crucially important because the conditions are sort of, okay, in this fishery is not in agreement completely 100% with the standard, but you have 5 years. Is 4 years of surveillance in the future in order to improve this problem. Okay, so in these 5 years, for example, there is not a management plan. The fishery can go to the manager and say, look, they certify my fishery, but in the last 5 years, I need that you develop a management plan. Okay, so if in these 5 years the team of experts is not seeing any development in this sense, of course they're going to fail the fishery. So this is one of the reasons why it's crucially important. The eco-labeling is in general important for fishery management. It's a sort of enhancement of the activity. Some fishery that would need 20 years in order to have a management plan, like in the Adriatic. If they want to be certified, maybe they would need 5 years. Of course, I see in some cases, I see the problem that there is not a lot of interest because maybe they don't care to be certified. Some fishery don't care to be certified because their product is already high value, is not huge quantity. But in cases like the clam, where the quantity in some cases is quite big, and the market is always has a high demand, but the price doesn't go up. To be certified, it means that in that case of the clam fishery in Chioggia was that they managed to enter in some distribution, big distribution like Scalo, some frozen distribution firm that are paying much more, or they can enter in German market, or they can enter in other supermarket that they request eco-labeling for their product. So in this sense, of course, there is an increase of demand and there is an increase of price. So this is all the process, but I wanted to focus on this fact that setting the conditions can for sure has to improve the fishery. And if the condition every year are checked against the surveillance, if there is no development, there is no progress against this condition, of course the fishery is suspended. Okay, I want to give you an idea. This is statistics about the number of certified fishery. At the moment is almost 16% of annual global harvest of wild capture fishery are certified as MSC, so it's quite a big amount. And there are almost 400 certified fishery, another 100 around are in assessment, so maybe they will become certified in the following years. Have in mind that a certification process is not 1 month. Can last 1 year, 1 year and a half, depending on many factors, but it's quite a long process. And at the moment, there are 36 countries that they have fishery that are certified and 180 species. Just to give you an idea, this is the last data I found. So 83% of the scallops landed in the world are certified. 61% for cods and eggs, 67% in terms of lobsters. Also, the krill is a quite important resource. Some krills fishery are certified, and also, of course, some. Of course, you see that I didn't put the percentage is much lower for tuna fisheries, although a lot of tuna fisheries are certified, but most of them are still in assessment, and other small pelagic fisheries are not. They don't have this high. In this slide, I just wanted to put the fish, the group of fish that have more than 50% that are certified. So all the other are not certified, and of course a huge amount is all the tuna fishery is much higher landings. So of course, as you can see, the increasing pattern in number of certified fishery. There is also an increasing pattern in number of chain of custody that is certified. When I say chain of custody, I'm talking about all these kind of landing point that need to be certified. Because a fishery, imagine a fishery can land in several places. In this place, there can be a storeroom, a factory that needs to be certified. So of course, this is something that goes together. And there are more than 40,000 consumer-facing MSC products. Also, all these. I don't know if you go to the supermarket, you buy frozen cod, and so you can see that there is the label of MSC, and there are in many places, in many supermarkets, but also IKEA. So there is a quite huge number of products that they have this label, and you can see how in Europe there is for sure the higher number of certified products. In terms of improvement, let's talk about the environmental improvement that MSC developed in the years. For sure, there is an improvement in the sustainability of the stock. Have in mind that a stock, we will see this one in more detail. A stock can be even overfished or in overfishing, but can be certified because there can be a period of 5 years that they can the stock can return to a certain high level if there are, of course, some management action. So this for sure improve the sustainability of fish stock in the sense of the target stock, of course. There is there is a reduction in bycatch, habitat and ecosystem improvements, including gear modification and introduction of conservation measures. Of course, there are fishery management improving, including increase in compliance with the regulation. One key point in all of this that is my main interest, there is an increase in the research into fishery, and I will give you some example. And of course, there is an improvement also. One of the requests of the standard is also to have an ecosystem-based management, and we will see also this. In terms of habitat protection, we see that 13% of MSC certified fishery have improved the way they manage their impacts on the marine habitats, making change on the water and funding new research, no scientific research to inform further improvements. And these are some of the research action that has been triggered by the fact that the fishery wants to be certified. And there are also some specific technical actions like spatial closure that can improve the fishery that they were setting condition on these fisheries. It's also interesting to talk about the cost of all of this. So a certification and audit costs are not fixed, depends on many factors, but they can cost from $15,000 to $120,000. The benefit to fishing company and their market are difficult to estimate, but of course are difficult to estimate because there is not only an increase in price, but there is also the possibility to access the certification gives also the possibility to access to new market. I put an example of the US albacore tuna that was in the Pacific. In 2007 was certified, and there was an increase for the fishermen in terms of price of 32%, which is quite a lot. And this increase was because basically this tuna that was fished in the Pacific, in some remote island in the Pacific, managed to enter in a certain chain of custody that brought this product from the Pacific area to USA, where the prices went up. So this is quite important. As I said, and I'm going to repeat, once the fishery is certified, it's not the end, it's just the start. Because every year there is a surveillance. In the surveillance, the certification body is going to evaluate the progress toward a certain condition. And more important, or equally important, is going to evaluate if there is a sort of change in the fishery, because have in mind that the fishery can change for other reasons. I don't know, a stock can collapse for environmental reasons. That's in that case, of course, the fishery cannot be certified. And after 5 years, there is a new full assessment. So after 5 years, the certification entering a new full assessment in all the process that I showed you before. So it's quite important that once the fishery is certified, who is involved in the fishery is taking care of all this process. And again, I want to stress that there can be an objection process. Anytime an NGO can enter in the process, says, of course, with evidence, all this is evidence-based. It's not opinion-based. I mean, it's not a shark alliance can come and say, in my opinion, this fishery is going to kill too many sharks. You have to bring data, you have to bring scientific evidence. Otherwise, you don't enter in the objection process. But sometimes the NGOs are bringing scientific evidence and they can start an objection process. Of course, I'm going to repeat about the importance of traceability because the MSC products can be tracked back to the MSC certified source of fishery throughout the chain of custody certification. This is crucially important. And chain of custody is a requirement for any company that wants to sell, to promote products as MSC certified. Can be primary or secondary processor, distributor, importers, retailers of fresh department or also frozen department. So the two things are always together, and I think there is a lot of interest also in try to have a chain of custody that is going to preserve a good quality of the product. Okay, this is again on the chain of custody. To be honest with you, I'm not an expert. I don't work on the chain of custody. I don't know the standard of the chain of custody, but I guess that are quite complex and are quite important as well. So I just wanted to give you an example, and I will do a question now. So some years ago, I think it was 2017 or 16, an Italian fishery started the process to become certified. It was a fishery with the pelagic petrol in Northern Adriatic, and they want to certify European anchovy and European pilcard, Creusinga residuus, Sardina pilcardus in the Northern Adriatic. So my question to you is, in your opinion, this fishery has been certified, it was 2015, has been certified or not? Of course, I already told you that was only one. But can you speculate on why this fishery was not certified, was withdrawn from the certification? Why failed it? Discard. Discard by catch.
Yeah, I catch a flow for this time.
Yeah, I think it was
No, actually, she's right. It was not because of bycatch. But when you say bycatch, what do you mean? You mean endangered species?
I mean the project that we run the last 7 years.
Okay. No, actually, that was not a problem. I mean, was a problem, but probably was going to be a condition that probably in 5 years was going to solve the problem. Any other idea why this fishery failed? Exactly. Not only lack of management plan, lack of a sort of collaboration between Italy and Croatia in order to decide on quota, decide of effort control. It was 2015, so it was before the management plan of small pelagic in the Adriatic. And it was just at the beginning. And anyway, if they are going to apply again, I am afraid that they are going to fail again, because the implementation of this plan is still in the air. I mean, there is an implementation in terms of number of days, but there is not TAC. There is a quota limit that actually is not trying to rebuild the stocks. I mean, and also probably the two stocks, I don't know now, the last stock assessment, probably the two stocks are quite overfished. So this is, I don't know, maybe they're not going to fail now, but for sure there will be conditions in this sense. And these is going to be quite difficult to achieve in 5 years. So when I was involved in this fishery, I was really sorry about the fishermen of Chioggia, because they came to me and they told me, look, we can implement everything. We can put net with mesh sizes bigger. We can fish 1 day less. We can implement our quota. But I was sorry to tell them, look, it's not you that can do something. It's the management authority, the Italian ministry, with the Croatian ministry, with GFCM, or with the European Commission, that they need to have a different approach in managing this resource. To be frankly speaking, we cannot imagine to have a sustainable exploitation of small pelagic only with the regulation of fishing effort, of area management, because the small pelagic all over the world are managed with quota, with TAC. But unfortunately, this is not the case, and there are a lot of studies in GFCM, management strategy evaluation, that has been done in the GFCM, and they clearly show that if you don't implement quota, the rebuild of Sardinia would need 10 years rather than 5. So unfortunately, this fishery could be quite difficult, quite hard to be certified in the future, but probably not. I don't know. It depends on how the management plan is going to be implemented. So you agree with this, or sounds strange?
No.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. This is the real good point. Why was much easier to certify the clam fishery? Because clam, they stay there, they're easy to manage. When a fish like this that is moving from Italy to Croatia and exploited by more than one country, it's much more difficult. You need much more agreement. And this is when, this is one of the main issues in certification. All tuna stocks are under the microscope in this sense, because tuna stocks are exploited by many, many countries. So even if there is an RFMO, there is the ICAT, there is IOTC in the Indian Ocean, and they set certain rule and they set certain quota for some of them, is not always so easy, because the sustainability concept that we have in Europe can be completely different from Africa. So it's quite difficult. But on the other side, it's also important to say that when the product increases so much the price, also the other countries that are not interested in this sustainability vision, for sure they want to sell the product at the same price. So there is a sort of commitment by also the other countries to become more sustainable in this sense. Hopefully for the Adriatic anchovy and sardine, this will be in the future, but at the moment I see that it's quite difficult, and this is the example why clam fishery in the North Adriatic has been certified with some condition, quite of them quite difficult, but it was much easier because in the maritime compartment of Chioggia Venezia, there are 100 vessels. All the 100 vessels are below a producer organization, and the producer organization, there are, I think, 100 boats. The producer organization set the rules. Say, if you want to be part of the producer organization, so you want to sell with us, you have to have this rule that are in accordance with the MSC principle. And end of the story. If the fisherman do not agree with that one, he's out. He can fish the stock, but of course he cannot sell with this producer organization. And of course, it's not convenient for them. This is more or less the story. So talking back about bycatch, one of the main issues in a lot of fishery is the minimizing the bycatch. When I say bycatch, I say not only about all the endangered protected species, but also other fish that are commercial, seabirds, sharks, and squid and this. So during the audit, a fishery show that there's a problem in terms of amount of bycatch, there are different activities that can be done: gear modification, impact and monitoring and assessment, impact monitoring and assessment, and change to management practice, some to area closure, and this. And these are real data. I mean, these are, you can see that the improvement has been made for 20 species of fish, for 25 species of seabirds, and so on. So actually is an improvement. Of course, there are socio-economic benefits in all this discussion. A small-scale fishery can enter in a new market, I already said, can protect the existing market, can give a product differentiation. There is an improved traceability and also in the sense of IUU. There is an increase in price, also the improved reputation and long-term availability of seafood and longer-lasting contracts. So yeah, a small-scale fleet can have a certain contract with a retailer and can have the retailer is going to buy the product only if you have a contract that said you have to fish in this way. You have to fish in this way. There is evidence that certified fishery have gained a number of socioeconomic benefits, like revenue, or beneficial in partnership, greater influence with the government institution, and I already talked about price premium, so increase in price and market access. Some example is the haddock for UK, so it was an increase of 10% in terms of price. The Alaskan pollock. The Alaskan pollock is the biggest, one of the biggest stock fished in the world, and again there was an increase of 14% from the UK market. Also, South African hake. I'm going to talk about the case of South African hake because it's really, I was involved with directly. It's really important. For a certain period, the South African hake lost its certificate. South African hake is one of the oldest certified stock in this sense. I think it was certified at the end of the 90s, probably. And for a period, it lost the certification. I'll show you why. And the loss of the certification caused a 38% in value, so it was quite important. And one of the reasons that he lost the certification was the impact that the South African hake is fished. This fishery is fished with trawler. Okay, there are actually two species: is Paradoxus, Merluccius paradoxus, and Merluccius capensis. One is deep water, and one is coastal. And there was a problem of trawler with the seabirds, because when they were trawling, when they were hauling the trawl, there were seabirds like albatross that they were impacted negatively by this activity. They were touching the wires and they were dying. So there was a huge, quite not huge, but could be an high mortality on these seabirds that are protected. And they improve these story lines. So they make these story lines that are now mandatory. It's basically a system behind the fish, the vessel, the trawler, that they try to prevent the proximity with the birds. And this new improvement was a big process that was started before 2018, but was a big collaboration between WWF and fishery conservations on a fishery conservation project. And actually there is a quite big interesting literature about this. And also from a social point of view, in South Africa, it was quite important to have these fishery certified because they can enter in the European market, and these landings are creating a lot of jobs for people. One other really interesting case of South African hake, as I told you, South African hake is composed by 2 species. Both of them are certified. And just so this will stop. So some of them, both of them are certified. And as I said, the Capensis is coastal, okay? While the Lucius paradoxus is deeper. The problem is that the deeper one is actually, the stock is not fished only by South Africa, the stock is also fished by Namibia. And unfortunately, Namibia and South Africa, they don't have a really good political system. I mean, they don't speak each other a lot, to say politely. But so this was a problem because also the Namibian, they want to be certified. And basically, they cannot certify the same stock without talking to each other. And there isn't a management plan. So actually, this triggered a condition in the last evaluation. And this condition obliged at least the scientists of the 2 countries to discuss. And this is, of course, is an improvement because now the stock assessment that is carried out in South Africa takes into account the catches of the Namibia and vice versa. And before this one was not so, there wasn't a flux of data, there was not a flux of information because basically they were not talking to each other. And when I talk scientists in South Africa, I'm talking about Doug Buttermore. So it's one of the father of all the management strategy evaluation, one of the big boss in the room, I mean, big lion in the room when they talk about fishing biology. And of course, he was really reluctant to involve Namibian scientists, but at the end of the day, if you want to be certified, even if you are reluctant because you think they are not able to do their job as scientists, unfortunately you have to, of course he was arguing that the stock was only genetically the same and not demographically, but unfortunately the evidence was that the stock as a spawning area in South Africa and is moving also to a trophic area in Namibia, and there is fished. So actually, the Namibian fishery can have an impact on the South African. The Capensis instead is a coastal, and because there is the Orange River between Namibia and South Africa, of course, the stock are not mixed and they have quite a different demography. And so in that case, there is no problem. But again, this is just an example that I wanted to give you how all these improvements, also in science, was triggered by the certification. I mean, the retailer, the producer organization that was the client, let's say, of the MSC that wanted to become MSC certified, was really afraid of all this situation, and they put a lot of resources in this, as in the case of the storylines, but they put a lot of resources also in the scientific development knowledge of the status of the South African. Okay, so just before to stop, just I want to give you also the importance of the improvement that MSC have in the global South fishery, so in the developing countries, because why is important? Half of the world seafood production is coming from developing country. Of course, it's supporting livelihoods of millions of people. Almost half of this is treated international. Of course, this food is going everywhere, and this mainly go to EU, US, and Japan. So a big market, and of course, there is a big focus in the standard of. I forgot to say the standard are not set once and they remain the same since the 90s. They have been modified. Now we are at the version number 3, and all the time the standard are modified. It was considered the fact that the standard they have is a word standard. I mean, they have to be applied in any kind of fishery. And so there is a system, I'm going to talk later, that you can certify a fishery, for example, even if there isn't a stock assessment. We'll talk about this. And was one of the development that the standard had, because otherwise the fishery from the developing countries cannot enter in this certification. Not entering in the certification process would cause a problem to them, because of course they were not competing with other fisheries. Of course, there are challenges in this sense, because there is data deficiency, lack of data collection, stock assessment, there is lack of relative reference point. Also, there was this problem in impacts on other species and habitat. Of course, the other big challenge is the fishery management. Sometimes the manager of these countries, they really don't care. And there are problems with cost and capacity as well. Just a few words about the standard. Okay, as I say, the standard are based on the FAO Code of Conduct of Responsible Fishery. They are developed in consultation with scientists, with the fishing industry and conservation groups. So NGOs are active stakeholder in the definition of the standard, not only in the process, so also in the standards. It reflects the most updated, up-to-date understanding of internationally accepted fishery science and best practice management. Of course, all the process is science-based, it's evidence-based. Of course, when you have the lack of knowledge, you always apply a precautionary approach, and there is the standard, of course, is the word globally applicable. Just a few words before we stop. What can be certified? What can be the fishery that we can say that are within the scope? So for sure there must be marine and freshwater fisheries, wild capture, including but not limited to fish, shellfish, crustacean, cephalopods, can be holoturians, for example. Fishery active up to but not beyond the point at which the fish are landed. So what you can certify with the MSC standard is up until the moment that the fishery is landed. From the moment the fishery is landed and award is the chain of custody standard that will apply. So this is really interesting. Also, introduced species can be certified. They can be certified if the introduced species is irreversible introduced, cannot be eradicated, so large population size and distribution beyond the area where fish introduced, introduced prior to 1993 or non-deliberately and occur at least 20 years prior to the assessment, and no further introduction of introduced species. So there is a part of the standard that is focusing on introduced species, and this is, I know, this is a problem in the Mediterranean as well. And there also can be certified that are in the scope, the enhanced fish, so-called enhanced fishery. So catch and growth, you catch mussel and you growth, this kind of fishery can be certified, hatch and catch, or habitat modified, when, for example, when you modify the habitat to have oyster, for example, in this case, you can certify the fishery. What is not in the scope, of course, all the aquaculture fishery. Actually, for the aquaculture, there is another standard that is Aquaculture Stewardship Council, so it's the same. Fishery that are conducted under a controversial or unilateral exception to an international agreement. Use of destructive fishing practice, so such as poison or explosive. Fishery targeting amphibians, reptiles, or birds, or marine mammals. Of course, these are out of scope. So before we stop for any question, after this, I'm going to talk more in detail about the MSC standard. That's quite big, but I would propose to stop for 15 minutes. Okay. But if there are any questions, please, now is the moment. Yeah, sure. Yes. Yes, as I said, now we are at the version number 3. But there was version 1, 1.1, and so on. And the update is regularly every 2-3 years, more or less. So yes, and during the update, this is a really important point. During the update, everybody can interact. I mean, the stakeholder, the update of the standard are open to the stakeholder. Of course, not all the stakeholders are interested, but the NGOs, WWF is one of the main key players in this. Other NGOs, Greenpeace, they consider MSC the devil, and they don't interact. But this is a matter of decision of the NGO vision that they have. But yes, are updated, and now there is the version 3, and in the version 3 is actually really challenging for certain aspects, probably.
Is also is because maybe their ultimate customers are not interested, so it's a kind of cycle.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Is that
to educate the people
exactly?
first.
Yes. Is exactly was the society at the beginning of my scheme was the society that the trigger of everything. One reason could be this. I mean, my experience with Adriatic is that also the Italian customers, let's say, they care only that the product is fresh and is fished here. I mean, the fish is coming from the Adriatic, is coming from this bay, and this is what they request, basically. This is for sure one reason. There is lack of demand. But the other reason is that maybe the fishery is already, I mean, the price is already quite good. The amount of catch is not so high, so all the product is sold easily. So the fishermen are not interested. But it's not the case that the fishery that are entered into the certification in the Adriatic are small pelagic, that they have quite a huge amount, and a clam fishing, that again, they have quite a huge amount. There are interests, for example, now there is an interest in Albania for the deep water raw shrimp. They requested to enter in the certification process. Of course, we, as consultant, we said, look, it's not the case because we are going to fail, because again, the management plan is not active, it's not clear. But again, they wanted to enter probably because they have huge quantity and the price is really low.
Just Albania.
Just Albania, don't ask me why. The Albanian, there are 2 or 3 trawlers. In the following slide, I'm going to talk better on how to define the fishery. Because the fishery that wants to be certified can be one single vessel or an entire fleet of a certain country, like Albania. But this is something that we'll see. Okay.
That's the flag. How the flag is.
No, the flag Albania. Sì. This is another problem. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to in more detail on the MSC fishery standards. As I told you, the standards are quite huge, quite complex, and in 4 hours lecture is impossible to have a productive training. So I'm going to focus on some aspects. So the first thing that the standard structure, they're structured within 3 principles, 3 big pillars. The principle number 1 is the sustainability of the stock. So there is a target stock, and this principle 1 is looking at the status of this stock in terms of biomass, fishing mortality, whatever, and the management that is related to this target stock. So this is the principle 1. The other principle is the most complex and really challenging, is the one that has the higher number of conditions usually, is the principle 2. That is the impact of the fishery on the ecosystem. And as I will show you later, the impact is on the other species, commercial species, the impact on the endangered, treated, and protected species, mammals, seabirds, amphibians, reptiles, the impact on the habitat, and the impact on the ecosystem. So you will see that there are 5 components on principle 2 that are going to consider the impact of the fishery on the ecosystem. The third one, that is actually also challenging, is that the governance. That the principle 3 is about the governance, that there is an effective management. So principle 3 is going to look at all the aspects that are related with the compliance. So a fishery cannot be certified if there isn't a compliance system, if there is not a monitoring, a control, and surveillance system that is implemented, that this is effective. So usually in an audit team, usually is composed by an expert that is in principle 1, an expert that is on principle 2, and an expert that is on principle 3. The background usually is, okay, the expert on principle 1 usually is a stock assessment expert that is dealing with the stock assessment, fishery management, so it's my profile actually. The expert 2 usually are wider biologists dealing with the impact of the system. Food web can be an expert in food web modeling, for example, can be an expert on the fishery impact in terms of the impact on the habitat and these kind of things. Principle 3 is usually an expert on governance, so can be a lawyer or can be someone that works in the administration. So there are, of course, there are different backgrounds that they can cover these 3 aspects. Sometimes the audit team is composed only by 2 because someone can cover principle 1 and 2 or principle 2 and 3, depends. And this is usually how it's composed. We talked up to now, I'm always talking about fishery. So a fishery certified, a fishery is going to have condition, but what in the MSc term is defined as fishery. So unfortunately, again, there will be an acronym that is unit of assessment. So imagine that the unit of assessment is defined by the target stock, skipjack tuna, albacore, clam, whatever, the fishing gear, the fishing practice. So skipjack tuna fished by purseine, vessel or a fleet, fished tuna fishing with purseine by the Seychelles fleet or by the Spanish fleet. Other eligible fishery that are included in the in an MSc fishery assessment. So if the UOA can be skipjack tuna fished with purseine by the Seychelles and Spanish that they're using exactly the same gear, or can be defined as specific fishing seasons and area. So is defined also by especially the interior Indian Ocean in a certain period. So these more or less these 5 characteristics, they define a unit of assessment. Okay, this is the fishery. When I say UOA, we talk about this. The other thing is the unit of certification. So the unit of certification is a subsample of the unit of assessment that is actually the one that goes and pay to be certified. Go to the CAB, to the certification assessment body, gives the fee, and they are applying for the certification. Of course, there's target stock, fishing method, and practice, and including and they can be a single vessel or 20 vessel or 100 vessel. It depends. In some cases, like the clam fishery, the UOA is equal to the UOC because it's the entire 100 vessel that they applied to be certified for the clam fishery in the maritime of Chioggia Venezia. So it's a particular area using hydraulic traction. And in this case, there isn't any other eligible fishery because according to the Italian regulation, only that vessel can fish there. And actually there is a big problem because other vessels from other compartment from Ravenna, they go to fish there. Of course, there is a fight. And the area is really well specified. One important point, principle 1 and principle 3, I will, okay, probably is better. So principle 1 is looking at the entire stock. Okay, so imagine you have a tuna stock that is fished in this area in Indonesia by more than one country. So, of course, the principal one is looking at the status of the stock, not only in one area, one bay, but in the entire area of distribution of the stock. Principle 2 is looking at the impact of that vessel. Okay, so is looking at the vessel that are fishing with handle line or with pull line, not the fishery that is fishing with pull seine. Okay, so of course, principle 2 is related with the UOA in the sense that, of course, it's going to look at the impact of pull seine that is different from trawler, from long line, whatever. The principle 3 has a wider management. So principle 3 is going to look at all the international agreements and the international rules that are managing the stock, managing the fishery, but also the national rules that are managing the fishery. So this is how the requirements are structured and what is assessed. So this is just the example. So the species is skipjack tuna. It's under the principle 1. The principle 1. The method is handline. So the UA is defined by the target stock, skipjack tuna, fished with handline, and in the location of the Java Sea, and the vessel from this particular area. Okay. So this is the definition of unit of assessment. Of course, in this unit of assessment, only these two blue vessels are the unit of certification because they apply to be certified, and the third vessel there, imagine that is fishing there, for whatever reason, is not interested in the certification. If, of course, he wants to enter in the certification process, he will pay his fee, or we will do an agreement with the other two vessels to pay to share the cost, and it can enter in the certification and be certified. But it's important to stress that the assessment of the fishery in relation to the standard is carried out against the is carried out on the unit of assessment rather than the unit of certification. Again, in the Adriatic, the pull seine fishery active on small pelagic is the entire pull seine fishery that is active in Croatia, in Zara, Conti, for example. That one is the UA, the 100, I don't know how many vessels, 50 vessels that are fishing in the Adriatic Sea using pull seine. And that one is the unit of assessment. If only the vessel from Zara, they want to be certified, that one is the unit of certification. Okay? Any question about this? This is a quasi crucial point. I mean, to define the unit of assessment, the unit of certification. Of course, it's not always easy because, especially when there is there are vessels using more than one gear, it starts to be challenging because there is an issue in traceability. So when there is a small scale fleet that is fishing with more than one gear, in order to be certified, they have to have on board only the gear that is certified. They cannot have more than one. I do an example. In Iceland, I think more than 90% of the landing are MSC certified. And in order to avoid problem with the traceability, they try to certify everything, every single species, because in this way, for the vessel, it's much easier not only to have more than one gear that is not so often in Icelandic vessel, but they don't have problem in terms of multiple species landing. So they have a troll fishery that they fish, of course, more than one species, and they try to certify all the fishes that they land in order to avoid problem with the traceability and with the chain of custody. And I always say that when we say, the Mediterranean fishery is difficult to manage because it's a multi-specific fishery, yes, it's true, but there are other examples, like in Iceland, that they have a multi-specific fishery, and they are managed with TAC, they are managed with quota, that are certified. So the issue of multi-species sometimes is an excuse, in my opinion, for the Mediterranean, in order not to implement proper management actions. So questions on this? Yeah. Okay, of course, good point. Iceland is really few inhabitants, so they have huge landing, they have to export everything. In order to access the markets, they need to be certified because the internal market is, I don't know, it's less than 10% of the landings. And the point is that the big distribution, Tesco, Walmart, Carrefour, they accept fishery products that are MSC certified. So if you lose the certification, they are fish that they cannot go in this distribution, and that one makes the difference. And why Walmart or Carrefour they start this policy? Because they agree to have a certain sustainability rules, and as for the agriculture product or for fruit product, they have certain rules. They decide to have MSC product on their shares. Okay, so this is crucially important to understand the difference between unit of certification and unit of assessment in MSC term. I will show you another example at the end of this presentation that is about the Adriatic standard that we started to implement, and also in that case we were thinking of something similar. Okay, a fishery decides to be certified. What are the general information that the fishery needs to provide? And the assessment team need to gather. First of all, a map with distribution of fishing effort within the jurisdiction boundaries of the fishery, of course, distribution of the fishing effort on target stock outside the fishery that we certified. So the skipjack tuna, of course, is all the Indian Ocean that is fished. So it's not only the fishing effort of that one, of that UOA, you need more than one. You need information and maps about the species, the habitat, and the community distribution. And of course, you need a description of monitoring strategy, if there is a data collection in place. All these kind of information are crucially important in order to do the assessment of the fishery, of the UA. Of course, it's really important to gather data, expert opinion, conduct stakeholder consultation to gather this information, assist of fishery, assist in the derivation of fishery impact, and of course, we will do a training on how to score the fishery. And also, we need to gather information to evaluate the risk of the fishery. Some terminology. So, as we say, we have three main principles. Within each principle, there are different components. We will talk about, of course, I will do a training for you about principle one because I think it's the easiest and that we can do during a lecture like this, otherwise it's too long. So within each principle, we have different components. Each component is defined by a performance indicator. The performance indicator has different scoring guideposts, different characteristic that we have to look, and each scoring guidepost can have different scoring issue. Okay, and we will see this. So these are the MSC standard in one picture. So we have principle one with two components: the outcome that is about the status of the stock, and the harvest strategy. So the combination of data collection, provision of advice, harvest control rules, and management action. Under the component outcome, you have two performance indicators, stock status and stock rebuilding. We'll talk about this. And after the component harvest strategy, you have a performance indicator that is harvest strategy again, harvest control rules, information and monitoring, and assessment of the status of the stock. So each performing indicator, we will see later, can have a score from 60, 80, or 100. 100 is the best practice. So is the Ferrari of certification, let's say. 80 is acceptable. 60 is again acceptable with conditions, so you need some improvement. Less than 60, the fishery is going to fail. So if one of these orange square is going to score less than 60, the fishery will fail. And end of the story. Principle 2 is about the environment. So now this is the old standard. Now it changed. Principle 2 has 5 components: primary and secondary species. So are the other commercial species that are defined as primary and secondary. I'm not going to talk about this because it's changed. ETP species, habitats, and ecosystem. And as you can see here, each component in the principle 2 is defined by outcome. So the status of this ATP species, the status of the ecosystem, the management measures, and the information that are related with this available for this. Principle 3, fishery management. So has 2 components, one more broad, more general, the governance and policy, and one that is related with the fishery management system, that is more related with the UOA rather than the management system. And it has 3 principal performance indicators under governance and policy, and 4 under fishery management system. And of course, for example, there should be a decision-making process. There should be a compliance and enforcement. So of course, the Principle 3 expert needs to go at the management authority, the ministry, and ask, do you have a list of infringements of this fishery? Yes, we have. And you see, okay, in the years, there was always an infringement in this kind of characteristics. So in that case, it's less than a 60 for sure. If there is a continuous problem with illegal activity, of course, that one is less than 60 and is going to fail the fishery. So, as I said, SG60 is the minimum requires, and if is one of performance indicator is scoring 60, is going to be scoring between 60 and 80, is going to have a condition. SG80 is best practice, so it's acceptable, and SG100 is the state of the art. Another important point is that a fishery is going to fail if because every performance indicator must score more than 60. And also the average of the performance indicator under a certain principle has to score more than 80. If the average score less than 80, the fishery fails. And this is just an example of how the structure is done. This is a P2. This is the principal indicator 252. So 2 is principle 2, 5 is about ecosystem, and point 2 is the management strategy within the ecosystem. The scoring issue are A, B, and C, and basically the certifier needs to give a score for each of these. Okay, 60, 80, 100, and there is a way to cumulative them in a certain sense. I don't want to go in detail in this, but this is just to give you an idea. We will see more for principle 1 in this sense. So, what is driving in the improvement? So, of course, if you have a scoring issue that is scoring 80 or 100, you have a so-called unconditional pass. You don't have to do anything, just you have to keep that kind of activity and you are not requested to improve. If you have something between 60 and 80, you have this conditional pass. So you need to implement a sort of action plan, a so-called client action plan that needs to improve this aspect in the next 5 years. And every year there is a surveillance that is going to see the progress against it. If it's less than 60, of course, is failing. this is more or less the story. And so, condition setting. Separate condition for every performance indicator scoring less than 80, so you need to set a condition. So the CAP, the conformity assessment body, has to consult with the expert, with the external parties, and assist, the client should be assisted in order to produce an action plan, a client action plan. And in the client action plan, there should be clear milestones every year that they have to be fulfilled in order to arrive from 60 to 80. And you have a 5-year time period. Sometimes you need even less time, but usually is 5 years. So I told you, you have a different scoring issue, and for sure you do the evaluation. You evaluate that this scoring issue is 80, this one is 60, and this one is 60. The overall score at the end is 60. Sorry, the overall score is 65. And there is a condition on this principal indicator. If all of them is 100, of course, the final score is 100. If you have all 80 and 100, you have 95. So you can have intermediate scoring, but this is something that is not so important. So to achieve the certification, I told you, the each PI must score more than 60, and if one score less than 60, if the fishery will fail. Any performance indicator that score less than 80 needs an improvement plan, this condition. Any PI that score more than 80 earns an unconditional pass. So no change needed, but during the surveillance, the expert need to check if something changed. And to pass, the weighted average, because there is a weighted average at the end, should be 80 or more. Otherwise, if it's less than 80, the fishery will fail. So just a question for you. So if you consider this, this kind of figure is called assessment tree, because that's this structure. So if is the box is green, is more than 80. If it between 60 and 79 is yellow. So in your opinion, this fishery is going to pass or not? Considering that in principle 2 there are more green than yellow. Also in principle 1. So question for you, is going to pass in your opinion? Yes, of course. Sorry?
Like yellow, you can walk with that yellow, maybe.
Sorry, I see gray actually. Okay, okay, this is a good point. So the stock rebuilding in principle 1, we'll talk more, is triggered only in the case the stock status is between 60 and 80. So if the stock is overexploited, so in theory the fishery can pass if there is a rebuilding plan in place. Example is the swordfish in the Mediterranean Sea. The swordfish in the Mediterranean Sea is overexploited, but there is a rebuilding plan. So in that case, principle 111 is the stock status is going to score between 60 and 80, and you're going to score also the rebuilding plan if there is. If there isn't, the fishery will fail, of course, because it's less than 60. But in that case, it's not. In this case, because the stock status of this fishery is green, so it's not used. So another example, so right, this is going to pass. So what do you think about this? In this case, you have the ecosystem are all needs a condition, and there are other also in terms of habitats, there are other yellow. So we don't do now the average, but this one, of course, is going to fail because probably in principle 2, the average weight is the weighted average is less than 80. So it's clear this system. There is nothing. It's not rocket science. I mean, it's just simple. But one of the reasons I'm doing this lecture is actually that to give you an idea of this process, and this could be a really good job for you in the future, because consultants are really well paid, and also MSC is looking at experts working for MSC when they do the standard, when they check the fishery, because of course there is a peer review system. One other point that I forgot to say, all this process, I'm going back to many slides, sorry. Okay, this one. You see here, you have this review part, and the first block is client and peer review. Basically, once you produce your report, there is a peer review college, so there are experts that are going to read your report, of course are paid by MSC, are going to read your report, and they check everything. It's like a scientific publication. They check everything, and they can agree or disagree with your scoring. Sometimes it's also expert judgment, but again, they have to criticize what you do on evidence-based, not on opinion. And so, again, have in mind that all the process is peer reviewed in this sense. It's also peer reviewed by the client, of course, because the client has the right to review what you are doing. And once you do the review, once the peer reviewer are reviewing your report, you reply as assessment team, you reply to the peer reviewer, and the peer reviewer can accept or can not accept your explanation, or you can agree with the peer reviewer and decrease the scoring of a fishery, and you do another report, and this other report is again open to all the stakeholders, that they can, if they don't agree with what you are presenting, they can start an objection period. And so this is the reason why all the processes request more than 1 year, because you, of course, you need peer review. You cannot do it one day. You need several weeks, also the report. And so all the process is quite long for this reason. So let's talk about the management feedback. So as you see in the principle 2, you always have a status. So you have to always judge the status of the stock, the status of the ecosystem. Once you judge these, you have to look at the management system that is going to maintain the status of the stock in a certain level. And also you have to see if the information that are available are good or not in order to evaluate the stock. And have always in mind that the precautionary approach is applied. So in the case a fishery is not having good information, the precautionary approach is applied, and it's going to fail or it's going to have a condition in this sense. Also, another point about the precautionary approach, because sometimes some decision, some scoring can be also based on expert judgment sometimes. And usually same unit of assessment can be certified by different teams. Imagine the tuna stocks. There are more than one team that they can certify a tuna stock, because can be the Spanish fleet that is fishing everywhere in the Indian Ocean, for example, can apply for a certification, but there can be also the Seychelles fleet or the Mauritian or the French fleet, the Korean fleet, and they apply to be certified using different caps. In a certain moment, you need to have a sort of harmonization of this scoring. Of course, the French fleet cannot score different than the principal one from the Spanish fleet, because the stock is the same. The management is exactly the same. So in that case, you need to do an harmonization activity. So you need to have meetings with the other cubs. And if there is disagreement, there can be a disagreement. At the end, the lowest score will pass. So this is quite precautionary. And again, this causes a lot of long meetings, a lot of discussion, and it's quite difficult. So my idea was to give you, was to focus today on principle one for two reasons. First reason is I'm an expert in principle one, so I can give you a better explanation. The second reason is because I think considering the PhD you are doing is probably the most interesting for you. And third reason also is the short. Principle two would request a lot of time, to be honest. That would not be able to finish before 1 o'clock. So it's also a matter of time. But the training you can have online, I will tell you at the end of the presentation, there are some specific links so that you can go and you can apply to become a certified. Of course, you need to have a degree in biology or marine biology. You need to have a certain years of experience, but for sure a PhD of FishMed can easily apply to become a team member of an audit team. So, talking about principle one. Principle one is about the sustainability of the stock. A fishery must be conducted in a manner that does not lead to overfishing or depletion of the exploited population. And for those populations that are depleted, the fishery must be conducted in a manner that demonstrably leads to their recovery. This is the reason why we have the rebuilding plan to consider. It's simple, but it's not so simple because we are talking about stock. Okay, this is the first difficulties in this sense. What is the stock? All the individuals of fish in an area which are part of the same reproductive process. It is self-contained with no emigration or immigration of individuals from or to the stock. It occupies a well-defined spatial range and is independent of other stock of the same species. This is the stock definition by FAO. That is actually the one that is used also by the MSC standard. This is the ideal part, the easy. So, but practically, the fraction of the biological unit stock may be considered a stock for management purpose, as long as the entity is distinct enough for the result of the assessment and the management to remain close enough to what they would be on the unit stock. So again, this is an FAO stock definition that is considered in the MSC sense. Also, the MSC standard considered a stock, the group within a species population which has sufficient spatial and temporal integrity to warrant consideration as self-persuading use. This is another definition that is considered in the standard. Again, the other definition is from Ibon and Walters. So, arbitrary group of fish large enough to be essentially self-reproducing, with member of each group having similar life history strategy. So, as you see, there is the basic, the ideal definition of stock, but in practice, the MSC standard, they consider also the more practical definition. Actually, a stock is a management unit rather than a biological unit. This is really important. But this is an example for UK, for example. No? In UK, you have the IFCA, can't remember now what does it mean, is I think it's a regional authority of fishery, that is responsible for the fishery in from 0 to 6 miles. You have MMO that is responsible from 0 to 12 miles. You have EU, okay, now it's not anymore for UK, but that was responsible up to 200 miles. And you have RFMO, coastal states, that are responsible beyond the 200 miles. You know, the EEZ is considering inside the 200 miles. So a fish doesn't know about these boundaries. So in the case of the stock that is only in the in this area, of course, you can consider, in terms of principle 1, but also in principle 3, you can consider the management from IFCA, from MMO, and from the European Commission. Okay? But if a stock is a tuna stock and is like the case of D, you have considered the management rules that are enforced not only by EU, but also by the RFMO. And this is the case of tuna. In the case of tuna in the Indian Ocean, you need to look at the rules that are set by IOTC, the Indian Ocean RFMO, Fishery Management Organization. And you need to consider, if it's a Spanish fleet, you need to consider also the EU rules, like the rules that set all the data collection process. So this is really important when you talk about the definition of the stock in order to understand what are the authority bodies that need to be checked in terms of management measures. And these are some example. Atlantic swordfish, of course, that is certified, and you have to consider the ICAT, basically the ICAT rules. But you can have a Scotian shelf scream that again is a scream that is going quite wide, or the herring in the North Atlantic that is managed by ICES and is providing but is divided with more than one stock. Of course, you try to follow the ICES advice for that particular area. So just to give you an idea, and I didn't put the map of South Africa here, I forgot, sorry, but the South African hake, the example that I was telling you before, is exactly the same point. Unfortunately, there is a Benguela Commission in that area, in the Southeast Atlantic, but this Benguela Commission that should act as RFMO for the South African hake is actually not active. So these are all the problems that are related with the South African hake, because there isn't an RFMO that is looking in that area, and there is only there is all this disagreement issued between South Africa and Nigeria and Namibia. So. What are the under principle 1? What are the characteristics of good management? For example, first of all, you have to have a clear management unit. You have to have a clear stock definition, and of course, again, if you come in an area where you have a lot of scientific knowledge, like the Adriatic, you can have this idea in terms of stock management, supported by appropriate information, time series of data. There is a harvest control rule. We need, in order to evaluate the fishery, you need to understand the stock status. So you need to have an idea of the life history and the exploitation rate. Of course, you need to have an adaptive management response. So basically the harvest control rules. I'm going to talk about the harvest control rule. And all this should be transparent in terms of the seizure rule, and there should be also a review of an evaluation of the harvest strategy. So this slide is quite confusing, I have to say, I'm sorry, but of course, all the management system start with data. So you have a monitoring. From the monitoring, you have, in theory, there was an animation here, but I didn't put. So you start from monitoring with the data, you do a stock assessment, you determine the status of the stock, you compare it with the reference point. Of course, you need to set the reference point and agree on management strategy, and you need to have action that are defined by a harvest control rule. Do you know what is an harvest control rule? Do you have an idea? So an harvest control rule are predetermined rules in a fishery. So if the stock goes below a certain level, these management actions are going to be triggered. If the sardine stock is going below 100 tons, 100,000 tons, the fishery is going to stop for 3 months. This is a typical harvest control. Or better. If the stock is below a certain threshold, the TAC for the next year is 20% less. So this is the harvest control rule. And unfortunately, in many Mediterranean stock, there isn't harvest control rule, or if there is not implemented. And this is all the management system that is evaluated under the MSC standard. So, as I told you, we will have a focus on principle 1. Again, principle 1 is based on 2 components. One is the outcome, and we are going to look at 111, the stock status. And in the case the stock status is below 80, you trigger 112, that is the stock rebuilding. And also we need to see the harvest strategy, the management. So it's going to look at the entire harvest strategy, so the combination of data collection, provision of advice or stock assessment, and harvest control rule. And what is requested under 121 is that these 3 components of the harvest strategy, so data collection, provision of advice, stock assessment, and harvest control rule, are working together. So the data collection is informing the stock assessment. The stock assessment is informing the harvest control rule. We need to have evidence that this component of the strategy are working together. Otherwise, it's no sense. There needs to be a definition of the harvest control rule and tools. So what I told you before, the harvest control rules is setting the rules, but also there are the tools. So the tools can be spatial closure, the tool can be the TAC, a certain fishing effort limitation, this kind of thing. Another important part of the harvest strategy is the information and modeling, what we call data collection, okay? And we will see. And also, another important point, especially for us, for is dealing with stock assessment, is also there is an evaluation of the stock assessment methodology that is applied to this stock. Of course, a stock that is a data limited stock can have a condition, it depends. A stock that has a stock synthesis approach with more than that is assessed with the stock synthesis, that is assessed with more than one method, with a management strategy evaluation can be a best state of the art, can score 100 in this sense. So this is exactly what a team member needs to check. So again, there is this circle that starts always with the collection of data and fishery performance. We need to evaluate the status of the stock and the stock assessment methodology. The stock assessment methodology needs to have certain harvest control rules that are designed and implemented. And these are going to be the part of all the management action. So the harvest control rules are not only need to be drafted in a management plan, they need to be implemented. You need to have evidence that has been implemented. An example, if the common sole, imagine you have in the Adriatic, the common sole stock, okay? The common sole is going to have an harvest control rule that say that if the biomass is going to be below B40, BMSY, whatever, or proxy, you have a closure of bin troll fishery for, you have only to have 50 days of bin troll fishery in Italy, example. So you do the stock assessment, you see that B is below BMSY, the management authority implement this thing, the team member is going to check the data on fishing effort. They say, okay, the rule was 50 days, you have to reduce up below 50 days, but actually you fished 70. So actually this harvest control rule is in place, but is not implemented. So this one is a condition or can be a fail. So the team member needs to have the availability of all this information that are not easy sometimes to access, but it's really important to have them in order to evaluate. And of course, In area of developing country, this is quite challenging to have, and in this case, there are some of the problems are coming in this sense. So the first thing that we want to see is the stock status. So we need to examine the impact of all the fisheries. So remember, principle one is about all kinds of fisheries, not looking at long lines or trawler only. It's looking at all impact that are going to the fishery. And under the performance indicator stock status, there are two scoring issues. The first one is the likelihood that a fishery is being above the point of recruitment is impaired. In easy term, basically, the stock has to be above BLIM, what we usually say BLIM in the ISIS term. BLIM usually is defined as the biomass below which the recruitment is impaired, the recruitment is in danger for the next year. This is the first scoring issue that you need to check. The second scoring issue is about that the stock is above or below the maximum sustainable yield. As you see here, we use the word likelihood. So in this sense, there is a use of the confidence interval that needs to be considered in the stock assessment. Of course, these are in agreement with the UN fish stock agreements, implies some empirical understanding of the stock status, but are phrased in terms of likelihood, therefore allow some qualitative approach in the case there isn't a formal stock assessment with that is explained in probabilistic term. Okay, so I told you that in the case there isn't a stock assessment, you don't know anything about the stock, or you don't even have a production model that is going to give you a data poor approach, you can have this risk-based framework. Again, it's a completely different approach, but it's been developed for the countries that they don't have a formal stock assessment in place. Of course, it's quite flexible. So if there isn't an estimation of maximum sustainable yield, the standards allow you to use also certain proxy. We know that sometimes reference points are not always available, are not easy to define. So we sometimes use reference points that are coming from proxies that are coming from the life history traits of the stock. So in the case you are a team member of an audit team, responsible for principle one, what you have to look, what you have to find in the reference, in the literature. For sure, you have to find the most recent stock assessment. This is the first thing you are going to look. Also, you need to look at any long-term or strategic stock assessment, review, evaluation, or benchmark assessment. So in the ISIS term, if you have a benchmark, of course, you need to look at this benchmark and look at what the ISIS scientists did. Of course, you can use any other proxy indicator of the status of the stock. Of course, P11 is focused on the status of the stock, but of course, you need to give an evaluation also on the quality and the quantity of the information used in the stock assessment. You need to give an evaluation of the validity and the robustness of the stock assessment, and also the suitability of the reference points. In the absence of stock assessment, you need to trigger an RBF approach, and the RBF approach is a participatory approach that you do usually you do a workshop with the stakeholder, and you gather the information directly with the stakeholder. So you talk with the NGOs, and you talk with the scientists of the area, and you ask them specific questions that are related with the RBF approach. But again, this is something quite difficult, and I would not go for it. So this is some of the, for sure you are familiar with this kind of graph. This is the trend of the biomass of a certain stock in time, and the straight line are reference point. So the red line is BLIM or PRI, point where recruitment is impaired. The green line is BMSY, or you can have a certain kind of proxy like BPA, BPA or B-trigger. So when imagine that the fishery was going to be applied, was going to apply to be certified this period of time, for sure was going to fail because the biomass was really low, was not reaching even 16 P111, and for sure going to fail. If was going to apply in this period, was going to have a conditional pass, was going to trigger a rebuilding plan, and for sure you need 5 years surveillance in order to rebuild the stock. If your fishery is evaluated in the last year, of course it's going to score more than. So having in mind this, let's have a look at the P11, so the first scoring issue that is about the stock status. So according to scoring issue A, the stock status relative to recruitment impairment, so to billing. So it is, let's read this sentence. So it is likely that the stock is above the point where recruitment would impair. This is AG80. The AG60. So this is AG80 is highly likely, and there is high degree of certainty. So this word that are with that are in black are going to define a certain threshold in terms of likelihood. So likely is a 75 percentile, highly likely is 85 percentile, and high degree of certainty is 95 percentile. So in the case you have stock assessment that gives you a certain boundaries, you have to look if the lower bound is below. The lower bound usually is 95 percentile, for example. See if this lower bound is below the billing, that means that you are highly likely or likely. If is all the average or the median is below billing, for sure you are below 60. So the fishery is going to fail. Of course, you know, the stock assessment, you don't always have this percentile. Usually you have deterministic, and there are some rules in order to understand which level you are. There are some rules within the standard that help you in understanding this, because of course the stock assessment not always is done in a probabilistic way. But it's important that you consider this likely, highly likely, high degree of certainty, a set different level of confidence interval that are in the stock assessment. Okay, so let's do an example. This is a question for you. Imagine you want to do the evaluate P111 for this Mexico, Baja California red rock lobster that was certified in 2011. So you have a biodynamic, you have a biomass dynamic model stock assessment. So you have a quite simple stock assessment. The current biomass is 1.5 times larger than the MSY, and is fluctuating around this level in the last 5 years. However, the PRI, the point where recruitment are impaired, are not explicitly defined. The level of recruitment is not evaluated, nor included in the stock assessment model, because it's a biomass dynamic. So it's a production model. You don't have age structure. Previous stock assessment indicate that the stock is above the point at which recruitment would be impaired. So, having this information, how would you score this? Is likely, highly likely, or there is high degree of certainty? 60, 80, or 100? 80? Che ha detto? to 80. Okay, why?
Because in the previous stock assessment, they state that PRI is a hold point where the equipment is impaired. We don't have it now, but the biomass is good. There are proof that the
PRI.
is
Okay. Other opinion? Or? Yes. Yes. So if the PRI was defined, maybe was going to score 100, but PRI is not defined. So it's more precautionary to score 80, as you said. So really good. The score is 80. So imagine now that you have this stock with the this is a completely different stock assessment, another stock, and you have confidence intervals, and you have 95 percentile confidence interval. Okay, and we have MSYB trigger, that is a proxy. We can say that is a proxy of a BMSY, even if it's not true, but let's talk about this. And you have BLIM, that is the lower one, that we can say that is a proxy of PRI. Okay, so let's look at the scoring issue B. That is not about PRI, but is about MSY. Okay. As you see, there isn't SG60. We start in this part. We start directly with SG80 or SG100. So according to SG80, the stock is at or fluctuating around a level consistent with MSY. SG100, there is a high degree of certainty that the stock has been fluctuating around a level consistent with MSY or has been above this level over the recent year. Back practice required good stock status and high degree of certainty, so above 95th percentile. Okay, so imagine now this example, the Suriname Atlantic SIBO. The assessment assumes CPUA is a reasonable index for abundance or proxy of biomass. There is only a single assessment, not benchmarked, with a number of model assumptions and some data quality issue. Target reference point is set just below 100%, 120% of BMSY. The current biomass is estimated to be 122% of BMSY. The recent CPUE have been shown to be stable. So in our opinion, again, looking at scoring issue B, what is the score? 60, 80, or 100? Looking at all this information that you have here, how would you score? Okay, 60, as I said, is not possible. So 80 or 100, and try to justify this scoring. Of course, when you do this exercise, you give the score, but you have to write a rationale in the report to justify the score. There are clear quality issues in the stock assessment here that wouldn't allow you to score more than 80. So again, the right one is 80. Okay, really good. So this is the way you start performing a scoring in the fishery. So in this, usually, of course, if you're scoring 80 in 111B, at least you score 80 also in 111A, because you should, the biomass should be above the PRI. If it's at BMSY, it's for sure above PRI. So, okay, I'm not talking about FIP because what are the challenges in doing this exercise? First of all, when the stock is below PRI, you need a lot of time to build the stock. So this is quite challenging for us fishery to be certified. Even if a stock is above PRI but below MSY, it would be still difficult to pass because it depends on other scoring elements in other part of the standard. Another challenge in all this process is the availability of stock assessment. Not only the asset stock are certified, and to have a time series of data that serve as a proxy. Stock assessment requires a lot of capacity and a lot of resources. Stock assessment is not for free. It's really expensive because data collection is expensive. The cost of the scientist doing the assessment is expensive. So troll survey is critically expensive. So if you want to develop a certification system in a developing country, of course, you have to consider this. Other appropriate and less data-intensive method can be available and can be used. Of course, in order to solve this issue, you need to have you can use this RBF approach, but this one is of course is more precautionary because of course when you use the RBF approach, you need to be more precautionary giving the score. But it's a completely different method, and I'm not going to talk now. So, any question before we pass to the next? Component. So, would you be capable to, if you have a graph like this, you would be capable to score the fishery against MSY, and so you can score now the fishery, as I said, it could be 80 or 100 depending on the state. So it's clear this. Okay, so let's talk about the rebuilding, the 112. So as I said, you apply the stock rebuilding, you score 112 only when you are scoring less than 80 in 111. And there are you need to have a rebuilding plan in place, and you need to apply to these measures that are evidence that they can rebuild the stock. So the scoring issue A scored the rebuilding time frame. Of course, shorter it is, better it is. And the scoring issue B is going to score required that the plan has been evaluated and there is evidence that it's working. So basically, we are talking about all these methodologies that are used in ISIS, for example, this management strategy evaluation or short-term forecast that are going to give you some scientific basis that they tell you, okay, the stock is low, but if you apply this measure, the stock is going to rebuild. And of course, this is strictly connected with the harvest strategy. As I said, the harvest strategy is the combination of monitoring, stock assessment, harvest control rule, and manager action. And they're required to bring about the sustainable management of the fishery. The harvest strategy should be pragmatic, cost-effective, easy to understand to all stakeholders, and adaptive. This PI has been the harvest strategy is between 4 and 6 scoring issue, design, evaluation, monitoring. In certain cases, there is also considered, in the case of the species is a target stock, you also, in the case of the stock, the target stock P1 is a shark, you also have to consider the issue of shark finning. So shark finning is completely banned by MSC. So if there is even one single evidence, shark finning, the fishery is going to fail. But to be honest with you, there isn't any P1 stock that is MSC certified as shark. So of course, And another important thing in the harvest strategy that we need to look is the review of alternative measures to reduce the unwanted catch. So all the discard plan. So you need to evidence that in this case, this particular matter is the only one that looks at the UOA rather than the entire stock. The UOA you are certifying in P1 and needs to have measure in place to reduce the unwanted catch. So this is quite important now that we are talking about the discard plan and all the lending obligation, for example. So I didn't give you an exercise on the rebuilding plan. I jumped directly on harvest strategy because of time. So when you have to assess the harvest strategy, what an assessor has to look. The key documents, of course, are again the stock assessment report, fishery management plan, fishery legislation and technical regulation, past review, and evaluation of the fishery of its component parts. Some other consideration in so-called traditional and informal situations. So, as I said, the standards are thought to be applied not only at ICES or ICAT stock, but also on developing countries. So you need to have you need to consider some so-called informal strategy. And when you have this informal strategy, you have to do this question to the experts that are in the area. Does this strategy work according to your experience? Are they understood by all? So is all the fishermen that understood the strategy? There is a clear objective. Is there a recognition of relative risk? Is the management adaptive responsive? So when you don't have a formal document of a management plan and you want to develop, you want to you want to score the harvest strategy in a certain part of the world, you need to have this sort of approach. You need to have this sort of interview with the stakeholder of the dialogue. But let's go to do some exercise. So now we move on the other column of the assessment tree. So we look at the component that is about the outcome. So stock status and rebuilding plan. Okay, we didn't do an exercise on stock status. We don't have time. Actually, we're running out of time. Sorry. So the harvest strategy design. So we are looking at the component that is about the harvest strategy. The first scoring issue is about the harvest strategy design. So you have a 60 if the harvest strategy is expected to achieve stock management objective reflected in P111 SGA. So reflecting stock management objective that keep the stock at MSY basically. That is a 60. SG80, the harvest strategy is responsive to the state of the stock, and the elements of the harvest strategy work together towards achieving stock management objective reflected in P11 SGA. So basically now you don't only expect that the harvest strategy is working. You also have to consider if it's responsive of the state of the stock. So basically there is an harvest control rule. And if this harvest control rule is working together with data collection and with the provisional advice. In that case, it's an SG80. The harvest strategy is responsive under SG100. The harvest strategy is responsive to the state of stock and it's designed to achieve stock management objectives reflected in P11. So that is going to have a MSY level. Stock must be at MSY level. So, of course, this is the case of the stocks that are targeted by a management plan. So, for example, the Baltic, in the Baltic, you have the management plan for anchovy, for herring and sprat, and the management plan is designed for these two stocks. In the case would be SG100. Just do an example, probably is not like this. So another exercise. This is about a spiny lobster fishery. in a certain reserve. The harvest strategy includes the following measure. Access control, so you have a limited number of licenses, seasonal and area closure, effort control, gear restriction, and size limit on the consumption. There is a good monitoring and control at local scale throughout fishing cooperatives, although federal monitoring and enforcement is considered to be less effective. So again, you have two different levels. Maybe federal level, you have less effective monitoring. All elements of the harvest strategy have been examined and updated over time to meet the maintain the management objective, maintain the reproductive stock, and recruit at levels close to maximum productivity. All the information available, including stock assessment, trends in relative abundance and catch level, suggest that the harvest strategy is achieving stock management objectives. So, considering these points, how would you score the fishery? I go back here, so you have the idea. So, consider this information. The harvest strategy you think is expected to achieve, or the elements are working together, or is a harvest strategy designed for this? I remind you, P1 is about the entire stock. Okay? And you have this kind of information. And this is a stock that is fished by certain cooperatives, but there's a federal monitor. Says. So how do you score this? You would say 100. Why? Yes, it's true.
They also.
Mm-hmm. But the problem is that in parentheses it says, although federal monitoring and enforcement is considered to be less effective.
Yes.
Yes, this is exactly what happened when there is an harmonization process. So probably you are completely right, because at the end of the day it's expert judgment. But there is another opinion, like me, that will say, yes, it's true, but because the stock is reached at the federal level and the federal monitoring is not so good, we cannot say that the harvest strategy is designed to achieve that as well. So actually, I would score 80. And unfortunately, because the precautionary approach is applied, the final score would be 8. But again, this kind of thing is what a peer reviewer is going to take, and is going to have a different opinion, and unfortunately, is always a precautionary approach applied. But anyway, I mean, 180 is not a big issue for the fishing. So let's have a look another one. Always again, the harvest strategy evaluation. Okay. The harvest strategy, the scoring under the scoring issue B, the harvest strategy is likely to work based on prior experience or plausible argument. The harvest strategy may not fully tested, but evidence exists that it's achieving its objective. SG100, the performance of the harvest strategy has been fully evaluated, and evidence exists to show that it's achieving its objective, including being clearly able to maintain stock at target levels. So again, you have this word likely, tested, and fully evaluated. Okay. So likely, maybe you don't know, but you have a similar stock that is an harvest strategy that was applied and it worked. So you can have a 60. The harvest strategy is not tested in MSC, in a management strategy evaluation process, but there are some evidence that since the harvest strategy has been applied, the stock is going up. So you can have an 80. SG100 is when we have a full margin strategy evaluation. And so the harvest strategy is tested and is going to show to be effective. So lobster fishery, the harvest strategy is newly designed and implemented. Therefore, there is no direct evidence that the strategy is working. Okay, because it's a new fishery. So you didn't have enough years in order to test that strategy. But the results seen in fishery of similar size and scale managed by the same management body and on generic analysis of fishery of this type reported by other researchers, seems that the strategy is working. So, how would you score this? For fishery? Exactly. Is a 60 and is exactly the meaning of the condition. So you are going to put a condition here. You are going to have a surveillance for the next 5 years, and in the next 5 years you will have 5 years of data that are telling you if the strategy is working or not, and so you can reach an aim. Okay, I'm not going to talk about.
But after 5 years, on 80 was the test.
And yes, you have some evidence that the stock didn't collapse, for example. This evidence would be enough to give an aim. But of course, there is yes. I'm really sorry because it's already 10 to 1. I was thinking to finish it. Possiamo andare fino all'1:15? Ok. Sorry, I think you are tired and ok, vado direttamente a parliamo delle harvest control rule. Ok. So 1, 2, 2. So what is an harvest control rule? I think is in the future for the people, some of you that is going to be involved in not only stock assessment, but also maybe is going to work in a ministry of fishery. You need to know what is an harvest control rule. Is crucial for me. So an harvest control rule is a set of pre-agreed rules used to determine a management action in response to change in indicator of the stock status with respect to defined trip per reference point. Define circumstance that will lead to management response. So it's the typical paradigm. If the stock falls below X, then the management will do Y. What are the tools in the context of harvest control? The tools are the action that are taken to achieve a certain level of exploitation rate, such as quota, PAC, fishing effort restriction, spatial restriction, technical measure, and all of this. Okay, so this is exactly what an harvest control is, and this is crucially important that you know. And this is the typical ICES harvest control rule. So you have a certain amount of fishery on the y-axis, so can be fishing mortality or can be tons. And you have the stock status. Okay, so if the stock status usually is biomass over BMSY, if you have biomass above BMSY, so your trigger reference point is here and your catch can be quite high. Once your status decrease, your catches have to increase until to 0 when you have a limit reference point of this point where recruitment is unpaired, where the fishery goes. This is the typical example or rule. Of course, you can have different steps. You can have different indicators like standardized CPUA, or this is usually a kind of harvest control rule that you do for shellfish or for rockfish or for some lobster, this kind of species that are not, that they don't have a stock assessment and they have just standardized CPUA. So the first thing you have to look when you assess 1 to 2 is that you have to assess if a fishery has defined an effective harvest control rule in place which describe the management response to different stock circumstances and to achieve medium to long-term target reference points and avoid limit reference point, are based on plausible hypothesis of stock dynamic and compatible with the target species biology, are reasonable and practical in the context of fishery, are economically sound and compliant with the national and international regulation, and recognize, of course, a wider ecosystem functionality. And this is really important with the so-called low trophic level species. When you do you apply the standard to this so-called low trophic level species, like some small pelagic or the krill, the standards are rather different. They are really much more precaution. And of course, they need to be transparent, predictable, and a precautionary decision-making approach should be. Let's see how the scoring issue A is defined by the harvest control rule. So below 60, you can reach 60 if the harvest control rules are generally understood, in place, or available, that are expected to reduce the exploitation rate as the point of recruitment is impaired, is approaching. So here you have the difference in place or available. It means that sometimes the harvest control rule is available in the sense that the stock never went below a certain level. So you didn't have the opportunity to apply it because the stock was always high. Some tuna stock is like this. SGAD are well-defined harvest control rule in place that ensure that exploitation is reduced as the PRI is approaching, and are expected to keep the stock fluctuating around an MSY level. Or for LTL is even more different. SG100, the harvest control rule are expected to keep the stock fluctuating around a level or above MSY or another appropriate level, taking into account the ecological role of the stock most of the time. So there are 3 different levels here. And of course, the SG100 is going to be applied when you have a sort of ecosystem approach. So your harvest control rule not only look at the status of the stock in a single species pair, but you have a sort of management that take into consideration the status of the stock also in relation to the other species. Of course, this is a state of the art. So again, the example of before that was about the Suriname sea bob. So we know that the harvest strategy is well defined and consistent with the agreed harvest strategy. Aims to maintain sea bob stock at level or above MSY. As a trigger point set at BMSY, which is intended to proper management to implement corrective action throughout limiting the days at sea, so as to maintain the fishery severely above the limit reference point and move it again toward the target point that is slightly above BMSY. Slightly above BMSY. So what do you think? Is an 80, 100, and a 60? And why is an 80, 100, 60? Why 100? Yes, it's true, but where is the ecosystem approach here? It doesn't talk at all about ecosystem. So it's looking only at the sea bob that probably is a prey of other species. And the harvest control rule, they don't consider the status of the species at all. Of course, it's is a best practice that not always has been considered. There's a really few stock consider the ecosystem needs in this sense. But because of this, actually the score is 80. Okay. So let's move to 1, 2, 3.
Which are
In the real world, there are some small pelagic fishery. For example, it's not small pelagic, it's the jack mackerel in Chile. That the BMSY is estimated in accordance to some environmental characteristics that are going to consider the availability of prey. The availability of prey for the predators, or the Alaska. Alaska is a clear example. In Alaska, there is a clear example of 100 in harvest control rule, because the reference point are set on a biomass that would not be below a certain level of prey that are needed for some marine mammals that are living in Alaska, like sea lions or orcas, this kind of thing. So there are examples of reference points that are set in accordance with the ecosystem needs, especially when the fish is a prey. Okay, I'm going to talk about information and monitoring. So 1, 2, 3. In this, we saw an example 1 to 1. We saw an example 1 to 2. And now we're going to talk about 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3 is about information and monitoring. So there is, of course, good information is the foundation on any adaptive management. We cannot manage a fishery if you cannot measure the stock, of course. Information is required for stock assessment, for to define the harvest strategy, to see if the harvest control rule is operating. Monitoring provides operational evidence for base decision, detection of trends, and baseline to understand future performance. What the information that are required under this scoring issue, under this principal indicator? We need to have information about stock structure, stock productivity, stock abundance, fleet composition, fishery removals, and other data that are environmental and ecosystem. I'm not going to talk about this. So again, this is under 1, 2, 3, the scoring issue A. Under SG6, you need to have some relevant information related to stock structure, productivity, and so on. You need to have under SG8 sufficient information available to support the harvest strategy. Under SG100, you need to have a comprehensive range of information, including some that may not be directly relevant to the current harvest strategy that is available. So, in this case, we have a skipjack tuna with pollen line in Maldives. In this fishery, you have stock structure, stock productivity, graph curve, fleet composition, you have tagging data, catch data, size frequency. However, some limitation of the data available, like the effect of environmental variability of the stock. You don't know how these environmental parameters are influencing the stock. So, how do you score this? Quite easy. Exactly. So you have sufficient information, but you don't have the spec. Okay, let's do another example. So the monitoring. Okay, this is scoring issue B. You have the monitoring. So you have stock abundance and UOA removal. So this is another part of principle 1 that is looking at UOA. That are monitored, at least one indicator is available and monitored with sufficient frequency to support the harvest control. This is under SG60. under SG80, stock abundance and UOI removals are regularly monitored at the level of accuracy and coverage consistent with the harvest control rule, and one or more indicators are available and monitored with sufficient frequency to support the harvest control rule. SG100, all information required by the harvest control rule is monitored with high frequency and high degree of certainty, and there is a good understanding of the uncertainty inherent understanding of the inherent uncertainty in the information data and the robustness of assessment and management of this uncertainty. So basically, here, when you say stock abundance, of course, we think about survey data. So there is some survey data or some CPE. And this is the first part of this scoring issue. So monitoring is considering both the survey data coming from CPE, coming from scientific survey or from CPE, for example, and the UOI removal. So you know that the fishery that you want to certify has a good system for removing, for monitoring the catches. Okay, so you have to look at these two things. So here we have really, I was involved in this fishery, the the quick scallop fishery in Faroe. So authorities require skipper to maintain logbook. So in the logbook you need to write data, fishing, or location, and catch for each day. Okay. Data on CPE. The CPE is not actively monitored by the authorities, although data are theoretically available. There was only one fishing season that was monitored with an experimental troll survey in a certain area. The CPE are monitored by the fishery who apply an informal move-on rule. So if the CPE, kilogram per hour, go below a certain level, the fisherman is going to move and to go to another bed in order to avoid the local depletion of the stock. VMS data are available to monitor area fishing, included closed area. So this is a fishery. Actually, this fishery is only one vessel. It's a big dredge fishing for queen scallop in Faroe. And even if it's only one, you don't have a lot of information actually. So how would you score this? 60. Other option. Why 60 and not 80? Yes, there is only one. It's only one. Instead, according to the standard, you need one or more indicators. So yes, the right answer is 60. So I'm going to do the last example before we close. That is about 1 to 4. Okay, so it's about the stock assessment. So 1 to 4 examine how appropriate and the adequacy of a stock assessment and a review mechanism is in place. Does not necessarily require highly sophisticated, complex, expensive, and data-hungry assessment, of course. There is a wide range of assessment that require different level of data, but require a reliable understanding of the stock status trend relative to a reference point, and consideration of uncertainty and appropriate peer review evaluation. And it has 5 different scoring issues. Of course, we will not see all the scoring issues, but just a few examples. And have always in mind that when in P111 you don't have a stock assessment and you are using the so-called RBF approach, risk-based framework, so it's a completely different framework, this performance indicator is scoring 80 by default. So you don't evaluate, you just give an 80. So, of course, you need to look not only at when you have to do the evaluation, you don't only look at the stock assessment report, but also you need to see other background documents like the benchmark assessment, the evaluation of the assessment by peer reviewer, if there are. And the best would be to talk directly with the scientist that did the stock assessment in this case. So I'm not going to talk about scoring issue A. I'm going to talk about scoring issue B. It is the assessment approach. So the assessment estimate stock status relative to generic reference point appropriate for the species category. Instead, under SG80, there are reference points at stock level that can be estimated. Okay, so this especially is going to look at two different things. And this you have the case of the Gulf of California sardine in Mexico. You have the spawning stock biomass recruitment that are assessed systematically using a stochastic age structure model with density dependent recruitment. This is appropriate for the stock, taking into consideration its biology and the possible stock recruitment relationship. However, a published review stated about this model. The model matched the observed catch trends fairly well. Recognition that the environmental factor impacts recruitment is included in the model, which also considered possible uncertainty. However, potential trends in life history characteristics and natural mortality rates are not included. Given the above, it is recommended that MSY reference point calculated from this model should be treated with caution. So, in your opinion, would you give a 60 or a rating in scoring issue B? Looking at the last point, I would give a 60 because the MSY is species level like the stock. Last example, just because we talk about this fishery, is the uncertainty in the assessment. Of course, you need to consider if there is a sort of uncertainty in the assessment. So the stock assessment model identify major source of uncertainty, SG60. Under SG80 takes into account the uncertainty, so uncertainty are in the model. SG100 not only takes into account the uncertainty of the assessment, but also needs to give the output in a probabilistic way. Okay. So the Argentina anchovy is another fishery certified in 2011. There is a stock assessment. The main uncertainty are the recruitment variability and previous year's numbers at age. These uncertainties are taken into account in the future projection. However, the assessment stops short of evaluating stock status relative to reference points in a probabilistic way. So we don't have a probabilistic approach. We don't know the classical case if SSB. The SSB is below a certain level according to a certain fishery. So how would you score this? Okay, I'm going to stop here for today. I didn't talk about the Adriatic responsible fishery manager that I wanted to talk about. But I would use the last 5 minutes for any question about the MSc process and what do you think and any opinion, and if you deem that this MSc approach could be useful for your career or not, whatever. Any question about this? No question, no problem. No, io arrivo. I think I think we are quite far to be certified, for sure, because the implementation of the management activity is not developed well, in my opinion. Anyway, even if we have a management plan, the harvest control rules that are in this management plan are not clearly implemented. I mean, we do every year the stock assessment, but the fishing effort, it seems that is more or less the same, and the stock is not increasing or is not rebuilding. Okay, of course, we have to see which stock in particular, but so unfortunately, in terms of P1, probably if it's not going to fail, it's going to have a really strong condition that maybe in 5 years are not going to be fulfilled. So maybe it can be certified for 5 years, but actually it's going to fail. And similar case, I think, for small pelagic in the Adriatic as well, or other fishery. On the other side, tuna, bluefin tuna, is the other species that in the Mediterranean is certified against the MSC. Why certified? Because there was, in the last 10, 20 years, there was a big impact on the ICAT, from the ICAT measure. There was a TAC that was implemented. Of course, there is a lot of illegal trade still of bluefin tuna, but the evidence are telling us that the stock is increasing. So all the harvest strategy evaluation, scoring issue, all the scoring issue that are where the manager strategy evaluation is relevant are going to score 100 there. Of course, the fishery that is certified is a pollen line, so it's super selective, and all the other fishery like poor seine fishery wouldn't pass because of P2 problem with the impact on ETP or impact on ecosystem. While this pollen line fishery in France, I think, is certified because, of course, it doesn't have an impact on other species, on ETP species, for example. And but to be honest with you, with the bluefin tuna was a big argument between WWF and MSC because WWF didn't support this certification, was against the certification because of lack of data, because issue in monitoring in terms of, imagine all the North African countries, the monitoring of catches according to WWF were not robust. So there was a big, I think all the process lasts for 2 years. And at the end it's been certified, but after an objection. So it's it was quite problematic, even if the stock is doing well. So it's another fishery that probably is going to be certified. Probably is the albacore tuna, because the long line albacore tuna, even if they can have potential problem with turtles, but if the fishery, the UOA is going to implement some specific device to reduce the bycatch of turtle, for example, this could be a condition that can be fulfilled easily. There are some, for sure, Alessandro is going to talk about this. There are some tools in order to avoid turtles and these kind of things that can be implemented. Anyway, this is. So, thank you for today. Other question? So good luck with the next. Time for lunch. So thank you very much.
Grazie.
Prego.
Presentazione.
Grazie a voi.
Vediamo